Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the True Safety Podcast. I am so excited this morning. I'm your host, Apolonia and Rockwell. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you so much to Rachel Walla. I have someone so incredible, so inspiring, and we are filming today on Construction Week. So this will not be aired. You guys will hear it in a little bit, probably in the beginning of April. But Rachel, how are you this morning?
I'm great. Yeah. Happy Women in Construction Week in the middle of Women's History Month. So how appropriate that we're doing a podcast with two women on it. And I just think this is going to be super fun and kind of a different conversation from the typical podcast. So I am looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh my gosh. Out of all the conversations and then reading your bio and doing our research, getting ready for the podcast, I saw a ton of similarities in your background with my background. So that just was really interesting. Just actually working in the construction industry as a safety professional, doing site audits yourself, like being in the field like that. So I want to back up and I want to start from the beginning on what in the world is your story. We have this gorgeous girl here. And it's like, how did you get into safety? How did you get into construction? I have a million questions for you. But yes, how did you start us from the beginning? How did you get into safety?
Well, I think like so many other people, I got into safety sort of sideways, or you could even say by accident, because I never set out to get into safety like anybody else. But I grew up in a small family-owned business. They did logging and construction in Montana in a very small town. And I worked with my dad from the very start. There were 4 kids in our family, 3 girls and 1 boy. And it was always like, you know, you're going to work with the family business. That's just what you do. So I very much grew up on heavy equipment and on job sites and things like that. And like, as an example, in high school, I would be working with my dad and me and my sister mostly did manual labor. So we'd go out on these construction or logging jobs and we're doing manual labor. And the girls that we thought were super cool were like this family in town that had a little mini excavator that they ran, and they got a cute little truck to drive around in their own trailer. And they could go dig ditches with their mini excavator. And we're out there like with shovels. And we thought they were the most badass. So anyway, I think, my family's more the mindset where you go to college to get a job, not necessarily an education. And so when I went to college, it was like, okay, what can I learn that will get me a job? And engineering was the most like practical thing I could go into. And there's an engineering school not far away from where I grew up. So I started out in petroleum engineering. And I was working in that field, and I got a summer internship in Texas my first year out. And going from like very small, depressed economy mining town to Texas oil fields was like the biggest culture shock.
I was imagine.
Like, yes, I was like, they spend $1,000 at dinner on interns. I don't get it. Or this one guy I was working with, he had a Hummer, and he's like, have you ever ridden in a Hummer before? Like, that sort of arrogant attitude. And I'm just like, these people are not my people.
This is interesting. You're like, this is a total culture shock, a mindset shock, everything. Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah. And so I spent most of the summer just going around with the mechanic changing oil on the pump jacks, because that was like, okay, I understand this.
Yeah,
I get this. But I didn't like the oil field that much. I think it was too much of a culture shock. I think I'd love working in it now. Yeah. But anyway, long story short, I ended up getting a summer internship planting trees. We had to plant 600 a day, super hard manual labor. And this company was working on a very safety conscious site, and they weren't happy with their safety person. So I started coming in on the weekends, running the forklift to unload stuff because I needed extra hours during the summer. And they were like, hey, do you know much about safety? We kind of need somebody to do the safety stuff because we're going to fire our safety person. So started there, switched my major the next year, and have been in safety ever since.
Wait a minute. Did you just say that you were halfway through? Wait, you switched your major?
Yeah.
Halfway through?
Yeah, I switched it like on an annual basis until I found safety. I just like switched majors all the time.
I did the same thing. I was working for a
Oh,
construction
did you?
company, oil and gas construction company. Like the excavation is in their name, but they did oil and gas construction. And then halfway through my degree, they're like, I wasn't doing the manual labor like you. I was in safety with them, but I was just going to school trying to figure out, what I wanted to do. And then once I
Yeah.
was like, no, this is serious. Like I actually really love my job. Then I changed my degree to safety. So that is so interesting. So continue on with your story though. So
Whoa.
you changed it. You're like, so then did you change it to occupational health and safety, or was it an environmental degree?
No, it was occupational safety and health. And that's super interesting that there's so many similarities there.
Oh my
But
gosh.
yeah, I switched it and never really looked back, but it took on a lot of meaning for me fairly quickly
Yes.
because I had been involved in like accidents and like one of my friends in high school had died because he was working on a dump truck with the bed
Mm-hmm.
lifted. And like the bed, when the hydraulics bled off, the bed came down on him. And I had been in situations on my dad's job site where I had to run like through the snow to get help because somebody had a heart attack, like all these different things. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I got into safety, it was like I never would have gone looking for
Yeah.
this, but it had a lot deeper meaning for me because it was like, okay, I see the direct application of, things like an emergency response plan
Yeah.
and things like, lockout, takeout
Yeah.
and all of that.
And did you, yes, the personal experience is first and foremost. And then when you were working in the industry, this is a question I've never been able to ask anyone, but since we have such similar stories, this is so crazy. So when you switched to occupational safety, wasn't it weird and crazy doing your classes and your papers are like, what would you do if a truck rolls into an excavation? Or like, did you ever have like accident scenarios and you're like, I just did this last week. Like, I know exactly what I would do. Like, everything in school was so easy because it was everything that I was doing or I've been through. So the degree, I mean, yes, the meaning was there, but like, it was just so, I don't know. It was just so real life that it made it pretty
I, I
simple
I totally get what you're saying. And I think in a lot of ways, like there were those real life scenarios where you're like, yeah, this is how you would handle
in
it.
real life.
But I think also like the translation for me that was tough is I grew up more in like small business where there wasn't much
I
oversight.
see.
And so it goes from like, okay, how do you handle this as like the two people on site where there's maybe not a lot of formal
I
training?
see.
And then translate that into like modern safety. So it was like that step up into, okay, this is what good looks like. That was a little bit of a push for me. I had to get my mind around
I
that.
see. Yes, because I was also at that time working for like a mom and pop shop. I mean, it was just pretty small,
Okay.
and so seeing that. Okay, one, there's a degree for this, and this is official. This is like real stuff. And then to hear kind of like what you're saying, that big companies have systems and processes and root causes and all these advanced things that at the time, I like what you're saying. Like everything you done was just real practical. Well, it was small company. Like it was just, yeah, it wasn't this
Yeah.
huge
Like
corporation
you,
with, safety departments, and there wasn't all this formal training that you had. Yours was all real life on the job.
yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that kind of jumped out to me was, for example, when my friend died in high school, like I didn't know the term lockout, takeout. We never talked about that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
just from working on my cars and being around like my dad had a big shop where we worked on all the logging equipment and stuff. He would get on us if we didn't block stuff up before we started working on it. So it's
Okay.
like, no, you don't depend on this jack to hold something up. Or no, if you're going to get under there, like let's say you raise the excavator bucket, you set it down on something before you are ever going to put yourself in the line of fire. But we didn't say lockout, takeout. We said block it up.
I see.
So
Wow.
like it's just a little bit different. It's like, oh, you guys have a civilized way of saying this.
This is official. This is interesting. I cannot, I'm trying to picture this girl, this young girl, like doing the manual labor, like you're out there, you're running a forklift, like you're running heavy equipment, like you're such a badass. This is so cool to talk to you. And so, I
Oh,
mean, when
thank you.
yeah, well, it's awesome. And so when you're in that company, or is it that time? I mean, yeah, of course, you guys have team members, you guys have employees. I mean, what was it like? Was it different because you grew up in it, that it didn't seem so, I don't know, were you nervous when the business started to get a lot of employees? Or what was the transition when you got into safety, you got the degree, and then did you stay at that company or did you switch to another company soon?
Yeah, so I got hired out of college to come work out here in Portland, which is where my business is based now.
Okay.
And I was working for a large paper manufacturing company. And paper is actually an awesome industry to work in. People don't think it would be, but in safety, you get a taste of everything in the paper industry.
Yes.
There's machines, there's chemicals, there's ergonomics, there's all sorts of different things. So there's a lot to focus on and a lot to learn about.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came out here, it was, people were a little bit more refined. And I'm going to sound so hillbilly now.
I love it though.
But it was totally like, they were more polite, more formal about how they did everything. And I remember our first big mill shutdown when they do all the maintenance. And I had been on the job like less than 6 months, and I had to shut down a big job because they were potentially going to expose people to hazardous chemicals and they didn't realize it. And so I go out there and I'm like, I'm sorry, like, I hate to do this, but we got to get XYZ in place before we shut down this job. And, one of the guys got a little hot under the collar and was like yelling and sort of making a scene. And I was just kind of like standing back, watching it. But my approach is like, I'm not going to jump in there and yell back. Like, I'm going to let him blow off some steam. The decision's been made, like we have to do this. So it's not negotiable, but you can behave that way if that's what you want to do. I'm not going to put up with it, but okay, I'll sit here and let you do it for a while. But all these great guys that I worked with, and ladies as well, who were in the union, they kind of like crowded around me and they were so sweet. It was like they thought I was going to cry. They're like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And in my world, like, not necessarily for my dad's company, but like when I had gone out and worked in Montana as a safety person, that was fairly standard behavior. And so to me, it wasn't surprising. It was like,
this isn't the first time
I kind of thought this would happen.
Yeah, you were fine. So people, okay, that's a good way to segue into that. I mean, I'm super curious. Sure. I mean, when you had what was it like the first times that you really had to put your foot down, or you had, a disagreement with somebody, and how was that held out? Because I'm sure people are like, you have this young girl on the site, like what, maybe some people might be like, what can she teach me? What are we here for? What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I think you get it too. Like, people see you on site and they're probably like, thinking, what's she doing here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, she probably doesn't know anything. I feel like that's the way that people looked at me, especially when I was younger.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, I'm assertive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can push me a little ways and I'll be friendly and I'll be nice, but I don't need to put up with anybody's crap. We're there to work. And if you can't understand that, like, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to help you get stuff done in safety. And I'm very much like, I will work with you. I will help solve problems, not create them. I'll be your buddy. But if you're going to come back and yell at me and not work with me on things, I can draw that hard line, because I'm an adult. You're an adult. We're expected to act like adults and work like them. And if you're not here to do that, then I'll just go talk to your supervisor or HR right now because I'm here to get stuff done.
So you feel like you had early on in your career, I mean, you feel like you had that confidence to not put up with anybody's, BS. Like you could take a little bit of it, but like at the end of the day, like I'm here for a purpose. And so do you sometimes feel like you always had that confidence in you?
I think I had a little bit more confidence just from my previous experience than the people that I graduated with. But I would also say there's so many times where you don't want to have to be that person. And you don't, like we all want to be nice, especially girls. We're taught it's so important to be nice and to be liked and all that. And I genuinely like people. And no, I don't always have the confidence, but I can fake it.
That. That needs to be the cue. That needs to be a clip. I don't always have the confidence, but I can fake it. Oh my gosh. Somebody asked me that like on a podcast the other day. I love how you just said that. They're like, did you always have like the confidence? Like, did you always have, like all the right answers? And it was like, no, never had all the right answers. But I mean, sometimes you just need to go out there and you just need to like get a job done and like pretend that you have the confidence until you can really have it. But sure, it's scary the first couple times that you need to, walk a new job site or I don't know, meet new
for
people.
Sure.
But
I always have so much compassion because I remember those early days, like walking out into this enormous factory that's like got building after building and it's like a square mile of property. And, big time manufacturing was a world of difference from where I came from. And just feeling like out of place, people look at you like you're out of place and you've got to sort of establish yourself over and over. And I don't know if guys feel this way because I know some guys have big intimidation factors on the job site too. But I feel like you have to establish yourself over and over and over again as a woman in this business. It's just like constant.
I feel the same way. And you know what? Like just girl to girl, to keep it real, I feel like early on people would ask me, oh, is it hard being a girl in the industry? And I would always I don't know what it was, but I would always default to nope. Oh. It's easy to me. I was like, I don't know. I don't see a difference. Like guy and girl, like we're all the same. But like now looking back, I don't know, like if I just like I felt like I had to develop this hard shell almost in a sense. But like now looking back and I'm being honest with my feelings and I'm like, yeah, actually I was scared like sometimes. And actually I did feel like I had to prove myself like over and over again, my credentials or why I was out there, what I was doing. And I did feel like maybe if there was a male safety guy, maybe they could have been more assertive and more direct and it would have like a conversation could have been quicker versus me, trying to be nice and trying to explain why I want to do something different. I feel like it took me longer to gain the buy-in and to gain the trust with everyone.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I identify with. But, like you said, a lot of times I'd be like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not that hard to be a girl in this industry. And there are definitely pain points, and I don't want to downplay that. But at the same time, I think in some ways I benefited from being a girl in the industry as well, because kind of like that story I told you about where I go onto the job site and this guy's yelling and everybody thinks I'm going to cry and they're like being really nice to me. I don't think that would have happened if I was a guy.
Yeah.
I think people would have been like, no, stand up on your own 2 feet. And a guy just fresh out of college like I was probably, would have every right to feel very stressed out at that moment.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes people are a bit softer to us as girls, and that can be a benefit. And then the other thing that I've appreciated is like, I almost feel like people are more willing to explain things to me as a girl. So, when you go on a new job site, you need to know how a process works before you can really like go through and help with the safety side of it.
Yes. Yeah.
If I go up and I'm like, okay, can you explain this to me? And how does this work? And I can ask the questions that I think guys would worry more about. Does this sound dumb? Because there's like a certain assumption there that if you're a guy, you should know all this stuff. And as a girl, I can ask that and not get the same attitude back sometimes, like not get that same bias, like, don't you know this? So
Oh my God.
that's been
I
nice.
completely resonate with what you're saying. I think you're completely right in that, for all the girls listening, like, I think that is a huge advantage. And looking back, I talk about it a lot in the podcast, but certainly the time that I feel like I got a breakthrough in my career early on was when I was willing and to ask those questions. I wasn't going into the welding shop. We had a shop, an excavation side, a construction, and a roustabout side, and a trucking side. So I kind of got all of it at once. But I was going to the shop, I'd tell people, and, wear your glasses, and it wouldn't always happen. Wear your face shield. And then one day I finally asked one of the leaders in the group, he wasn't even an official supervisor, but, the guy that is the leader, that guy. And I just went up to him and I'd ask him, I started asking how things worked first and foremost with other processes. But then I'd be like, how come the guys don't wear their face shields? And he's like, well, because this is why, because we have these comfort issues. We have these things. He's like, at my last employer, we had these types of face shields. And if you got it approved by management to get us these new face shields, then, we'd wear them. They'd actually fit, they'd actually work, because we weld in, awkward positions, stuff like that on tanks. And so I finally got it approved by management. And then sure enough, that person, it was his idea, he implemented it and enforced it when I wasn't there. And it just took that curiosity mindset that I forever hold with me of, like you said, how does that work? What's going on here? And I'm very ask 10 questions to get somewhere before I go into enforcement mode. I'm always asking questions. I'm always really curious. So that's cool. And then,
yeah.
Am I hearing this right too? That you're at a mill. Is International Paper, that's a big mill, right?
Yeah, this would have been Georgia Pacific, but kind of similar things. Yeah.
Well, that's crazy. It was just a few times, but I had a client that was out east, and I went to International Paper a few times, and they were maintenance crews. The client I was with was a maintenance crew, so we would go in during shutdown. And I remember walking into my first mill, and I was like, oh my gosh, I thought oil and gas was dangerous, and I thought that construction was dangerous. I knew nothing until I went into a mill. I came back and I was like, oh my gosh, guys, this is the most dangerous freaking facility I've ever seen in my dang life. So, what are the similarities? You worked at a mill or no? Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the mill was a ton of fun, and I love the people there. It was one of those places where they had a really strong union. And a lot of the people in the union had been there about 25 years. And so their attrition rate through retirement was really high. But they were the coolest people, and they knew their job really well. And it was a small community. I loved it there. I actually worked there twice. So I worked there when I first graduated, and then I came back and was the safety manager a few years later. Okay. But it's got a special place in my heart. I know from construction sites, and sometimes people get sentimental about certain projects and stuff. And I'm get a little sentimental talking about the paper mill, because I loved it. It was a really good experience.
Oh man. And how interesting too. I do remember interviewing, talking to the team members there, the employees, and they were yeah, I've been there forever. And it was this forever, generational families that all work there. And I thought, this is cool. This is really cool. People were awesome.
And this is a little bit of a side topic, but I think this is important to bring up, because when I realized this, it made a big difference in how I looked at things. But have you heard of the book Hillbilly Elegy?
No,
Okay, it's a really interesting book. It's about this guy who, I think he comes from Kentucky, and his family moved to the Rust Belt to work in car factories.
Okay.
And he said that took his family from always struggling financially and kind of going from job to job to suddenly having full-time good factory employment where you had a reliable schedule and a reliable income. And how good of a thing that is for families and for for the economy, and just it makes people so much more stable overall. So some of the problems that we see in certain industries or certain segments of industries like construction and like the oil field, where people are traveling all the time. They're not near their families and they're lonely or they're struggling and they start drinking more, doing drugs, those types of things. You don't get that as much with steady factory jobs, and you're able to really establish a solid workforce. So seeing that after the work experience that I had at that point, and then seeing like the way that these people were able to live a very stable life was really interesting to me, because it changed, I think it changed the workforce. Like the work changed the workforce in a positive way.
Wow. And to see that culture shift, to see what to experience what that looks and feels like. I'm sure that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And something that you would want to, I mean, I can only imagine. And because my background is oil and gas. And gosh, there's like a million similarities. Like when that person told you off, or, was being rude to you and you're like, I'm like used to this. Same thing. Like if someone was mean to me at my, or being really blunt or being whatever, I would always be like, well, my dad's like this. Like you can't hurt me. Like
yeah.
I grew up in the oil and gas industry. Like none of this offends me, like whatsoever.
I posted this meme to my social media a while back, and it's funny what people respond to. But the meme was like, "You can't scare me. I used to hold the flashlight for my dad." And if you've ever held the flashlight for your dad while he's working on a project, and like the flashlight's not in the exact right place that it should be at every moment, and he's freaking out at you, it's like, yeah, you can handle a safety job. It's going to be fine.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. So I just, you know what, this makes me think too, speaking of that culture piece at the mill, I'm so interested to know, like, I have a feeling, I think I'm right about this feeling, that you probably have a really unique perspective on safety, and you probably have some deep-rooted philosophies on safety culture, how that's achieved, what that looks like, and like, what does safety all mean? What do you feel like your unique perspectives are on safety?
I think, that's such a big question. I think anybody in safety has probably evolved quite a bit throughout their career. And I know I definitely have. And I'm very much like a no bullshit person. I'm trying to like use the good words and stuff because I'm on a podcast. But I'm very down to earth and very much no bullshit. And I think that one of the things that has helped me in safety is like, I'm not really going to use all the main buzzwords that everybody else does. I'm going to talk to you like you're a person like I want to be talked to, and I don't like fluffing things up. I'm fairly succinct. But the biggest thing that's changed for me over the last few years is I come from a family with 4 kids, and I've had 2 siblings die in the last 5 years in different accidents. So my sister died in a car accident when she was 20. My brother died in an avalanche when he was 27.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry.
So it's like one of those things where it's not work related, but it's one of those things that makes you really, really think, because you just realize like how huge the effects of things like that are. It's not like, oh, I'm going to take a risk, even if it's a calculated risk and it's just going to affect me. It doesn't just affect you. And if something happens to you, it's not, oh, my family's going to mourn and get over it. It's like, no, people's lives are permanently impacted. And it's this decision between risk and reward. And it's changed how I think about risk altogether. And obviously, already being in safety, I'm not somebody who takes big risks. I'm afraid of bodily injury. But I think it makes me think more about how I can appropriately communicate to people who maybe will not respond to talking about compliance, but who you can just talk to like one person to another about risk and how you're thinking about it.
Oh, I like that. And so how have there been, let's say you have somebody not if, let's say when you've had a group of people in class, or when you've been a consultant for a company and they have that old school mindset, that work hard, safety last, like this is, hate safety. Like, how do you get through to that person? And is it different than what it was before? Or, how do you really break through to that old school mindset?
I think that I approach it from a different angle, because the tried and true sort of safety talks sometimes get a little stale, and people who have an attitude towards safety, that's when the wall comes up.
Yeah, you're right.
You can see
trigger words. Safety first. Safety matters.
They're like, oh, for the love of God, please stop. I don't like to share my story about my siblings a lot, because I feel like there's the risk of it being kind of construed as like one of those play the violin stories, like everybody's lost someone in an accident. I am not unique this way. I just had it happen a couple times in a row near to each other with people I was super close with, and it made me think about things a lot. So I don't approach it that way. What I want to do is talk through, how do we think about risk and what's worth it? Because we're kind of brought up to think risk is fun, and we all like an element of risk. Like if we look at most of our hobbies, they are riskier than our jobs. Risk is fun. Risk is awesome. Like it's a thrill, and that's fine. That's fine. Like if you enjoy a thrill of like jumping your dirt bike on the weekend, I'm not going to tell you not to do that.
Go for it.
Yeah. Live your life. Like have a great time. Live the way that you want to. But the thing is, take risks, but take calculated risks. So let's talk about it with work. If you're going to take a risk, let's say you're not going to get on your fall protection harness. The risk is probably, you save 15 minutes or whatever. That's the reward, is saving that time. But the risk is so great, it doesn't balance out. It's kind of like with the finances. You're not going to make a bad investment that's never going to balance out, because risk doesn't equal reward. You got to make a calculated estimate of what the reward's going to be. And so that's kind of how I want to talk about it, because as a society, with the creation of OSHA, we have decided people should not be getting hurt, get sick from work, or die from work. That's what we as a society have decided. And I think if you talk to most people, like just in their personal opinion, they would undergo some minor injuries for work to make their work life easier on themselves. But they wouldn't do the big ones. So when you're talking to people who don't care about OSHA and who will most likely never see them on their job site, it's like, okay, what are you willing to risk for your job? And let's also talk about the financial risks, and let's talk about how that plays out, because workers' comp doesn't pay a lot. And there's actually an article that was written probably like 8 years ago that's still on the web, where you can look up, it's like the best way to pull all this information together. You can look up what you can get paid out in each state if you lose a limb, or whatever the injury is. You can check each body part for each state and see what you get paid out. And it is astonishingly low.
Not what you hope it's going to be.
Yeah. So let's be honest about what we're risking here. And can your family go without you having an income for 3 months while you like deal with a broken leg or whatever? Probably not. So when you go to take that shortcut, ask yourself, is this the risk that's going to make my life better? Because some risks will make your life more worth living. Maybe it's four-wheeling on the weekend, or skydiving, or rock climbing, or whatever. Most of the time with work, the risk is not worth it.
Yeah. And you know what? It's actually really refreshing to hear that perspective. I haven't, to really break down risk and calculated risk, and, breaking it down to the most practical level. That example you just shared with fall protection. Okay, it's going to save you 15 minutes. Like, but is this going to play out for you? And is it worth it? And the obvious answer is no, but to break it down in the most practical sense like that, I think is what we sometimes need to do, what we always need to do, what we're teaching in classes, rather than always, defaulting to I don't know, some of the common things like being your brother's keeper and things like that. That is important, but we need to encompass all those things. And maybe if somebody's wall goes up when you're talking about the common sense reason to be safe, then it is important. And a tactic that our listeners should listen to really take home is to get on that practical level with the workers that you're around and break it down just like that. And I think that that's really cool. And we are already at time,
okay.
Rachel, and I feel like I've asked you one question. I feel like I haven't even gotten into like anything that I want to talk to you about. I seriously could talk to you for hours and all day because oh my gosh, like you're so fascinating. And I have to share with you that all these crazy similarities. I also lost my brother recently.
Really? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, just from a heroin overdose.
Okay.
And not a work-related incident, but holy smokes, to hear that and that we share that too.
Yeah, that's
it does
crazy.
make you think of life different, risk different, choices different.
Yeah, and especially when it's so close and like a sibling, and in a tragic way like that, it's like, I think anybody in safety, you kind of have to go down that road a little bit of, was this preventable? And we always believe everything's preventable.
Yeah,
and that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would love to schedule a part 2. If you're down, I'm down.
I'm down too.
Schedule a part 2.
This went super fast.
Like
I just felt like I was talking to a friend. So I hope you don't have to bleep too much out. I'm trying to stop cussing, but
Me too. Every day I'm like, I need to stop. I need to cut this out. I swear. This is crazy. No, it is like we were just talking. So pretty much this is a conversation between 2 sisters, and the podcast the audience got to listen to it all. But I still have a lot of questions about, how to conquer fears for people, for, maybe young women that are entering into this industry. And more philosophies around training, around safety culture, around company culture. I don't necessarily believe in a safety culture. For me, I just believe in a culture. I think companies just have a culture.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting. I never heard that until you. I'm pretty sure that's because it's original to you, but I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I believe that too.
Well, that's why I want to do it part 2 is because you are a consultant, so you work with so many different companies, small, medium, large corporations, mom and pop shop. Mm-hmm. And I just want to know, how do you get through, and how do you make a difference? What do you see between the industries? Because that's my world. And I think I would love to talk to you more. And I want to respect your time, and we have talked up the 45 minutes somehow. So cool. Well, I just, guys, for those of you who want to learn more about Rachel right now and don't want to wait till part 2, we're going to link all of her contact information, how to get a hold of her. I'm going to have her bio so you can read more about her as well. But if you want to connect with her, I'm sure Rachel is more than happy to take questions. And if you just want to chat with her and have some questions, you can reach out to her direct. So thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts around safety? That's kind of a broad question, but do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's Friday, the day that we're recording this, so we're going into the weekend, and I would just say to everybody, have a great week or weekend whenever you're listening to this, and work safely, live boldly.
I love it. Just got chills. I love it. Thank you so much, Rachel, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Yes, thank you so much. This is a ton of fun.